The upscale village that Nina and Sanjay had chosen for themselves had everything going for it. First of all, the location was ideal, not too far from the noisy metropolis, but at the same time a feeling of complete unity with nature. A thick mixed forest with forest edges, the clearest lake with clear water, where there were a lot of fat fish. Nightingales sang in the grove, frogs were croaking on the lake, an idyll. Well, just a paradise on earth. In addition, the contingent of the village was pleasantly pleased. There were no random people here, no marginal people or beggars. Not for nothing this place was called elite. Here bought land and real estate all millionaires and billionaires, businessmen, politicians, show business stars. In short, Nina and Sanjay fit perfectly into this community. Owners of a successful cosmetics company during their cooperation made a considerable fortune. And now, in addition, after several years of relationship, they finally decided to legalize them and get married. Nina and Sanjay long debated whether to buy a plot with a ready-made house or to build their own. In the end, to save time, they bought the land together with the house. However, inside it was completely empty, so they had to wait a few months while one of the best designers worked on the interior. But right after the wedding, they moved into their house, which smelled exactly as a new house should smell. Wood, a little bit of fresh paint, and pine, because there were many spruce trees on the plot. Nina pressed her palms to her cheeks and, glowing, turned to her husband. "God, Sanjay, how I like it here." He, smiling, picked up his young wife in his arms. "I like it too. I hope you and I will live happily ever after here, like in a fairy tale." "And die on the same day?" she joked. He shook his head. "I'm not going to die yet. We have to have a bunch of kids first." Nina wrinkled her nose funny. "A bunch?" Sanjay nodded nonchalantly, though there were chuckles lurking in his eyes. "Well, at least 14. I won't settle for less." Nina pretended to be scared. "But if I have 14 kids, I won't fit through the doorway." "That's okay," Sanjay promised. "I'll widen it." And without letting go of his wife's hands, he reached for her lips with a heated kiss, and then carried her towards the stairs leading to the second floor where the bedroom was. "What are you doing?" Nina laughed, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. "Where are you taking me?" "To make babies, of course." Without blinking an eye, Sanjay replied. How happy they were in their new home. They didn't need any Maldives or Greece for their honeymoon. They were so happy and comfortable here. Every day they went for walks, holding hands like teenagers in love. They reached the edge of the forest where Sanjay picked ripe large strawberries and fed his wife from his hand. The berries were sweet and juicy, as if made by the sun. Sometimes they went down to the lake, where they had neat wooden bridges for entering the water. True, Nina did not swim. She was squeamish and afraid. It seemed to her that there were crayfish lurking at the bottom under a layer of sand and silt, or even worse, some huge catfish. She had read on the internet that the males were cannibals who could attack humans. Sanjay only laughed at her childhood fears. Most often they had picnics on the shore, got fresh vegetables, fruits, sandwiches, cold lemonade in a thermos. Sometimes Sanjay would go fishing. Those were beautiful, carefree, warm days filled with love and romance. When the honeymoon was over, they had to go to the city every day for work. But still, when they returned, they were sure to find at least half an hour for an evening walk together. It was their peculiar ritual. And then one fine, or rather terrible day, this idyll came to an end. Sanjay and Nina returned home from the office, had a quick dinner, went to the lake to see off the passing day and admire the sunset. Halfway there, Nina became suspicious. "Don't you think so?" she asked, listening. "That there is someone out there on the lake?" There were indeed voices coming from far away. Even singing, I think. "Are tourists coming?" Nina said unhappily. "Now they're going to spoil our walk." But they were not tourists. The closer the couple came to the lake, the more clearly they realized it. In addition to the voices, they could also clearly distinguish the neighing of horses. "I don't understand anything." Nina shook her head. Where did the horses come from? Meanwhile, a warm summer breeze carried a thick smell of smoke to them. It looked like unknown people were burning fires. Sanjay frowned worriedly and gripped Nina's hand tighter, as if she were in danger. They took a few more steps forward and came to the lake. There was a tabor on the shore. Yes, a real gypsy tabor." "Very interesting," Sanjay muttered. "Do gypsies still roam?" Maybe it's a movie set? Nina suggested hesitantly, realizing that it was not a movie. The gypsies looked too natural, sitting on the shore near the blazing fire. No actor or makeup artist can ever recreate such an accurate image. On the shore shouted grimy, barefooted children. No one paid any attention to the appearance of Sanjay and Nina. The gypsies did not care about the newcomers. What a nightmare. I wonder how long these beggars are staying here. Quiet, Sanjay told his wife. He felt embarrassed in case someone heard this unflattering characterization. But his wife folded her arms on her chest and stood in a pose. No, I don't understand why we have to put up with this. Did anyone invite them here? She raised her voice. Well, she'd gotten what she wanted. Attention was drawn. A man with a golden earring in his ear, sitting by the fire, came up and took a few steps in their direction. He was elderly. Black hair, thick gray hair, yet he looked very sturdy and strong. Obviously, he was in charge of the tabor. What do the gypsies call it? Baron. Just in case, Sanjay stood in front of his wife as if covering her with himself. The Baron said in a sedate manner, "Happiness to you, good people." "Thank you." Stammering, said Sanjay. "And the same to you, if you are not joking. Have a seat by the fire." The gypsy invited them cordially as their host. It was obvious that he was in a peaceful and even friendly mood, and Sanjay relaxed a little. It seemed that no one was going to attack, kill, or rob them. "Thank you. We've already had dinner at home." He politely declined. "And you must want to go. I thought all gypsies had long since settled down to a sedentary pace." The old gypsy laughed, showing surprisingly white and strong teeth. "Oh boy, how can you keep the gypsy soul in check? We live at home in winter, and in spring our hearts are begging to go on the road. But look, isn't it beautiful?" He made a sweeping gesture around the shore, as if showing off his possessions. "Isn't this life? Isn't it a fairy tale?" And at that moment Nina intervened and spoiled everything at once. "What right do you have to take this place?" "Actually, it's our lake." The old gypsy's eyebrows rose ironically. He stared at Nina curiously, without hostility, but also without the respect she probably expected from him. "Your lake?" he interjected. "Did you buy it? Or perhaps this land on the shore belongs to you?" "No, but—" Nina was confused for a moment but quickly pulled herself together. "We live in this village, and here to the lake only our own people come, only locals. This is not your land." Calmly but firmly repeated the gypsy. "And the lake is not yours either. That means we have the right to stop here." "You know?" Nina gasped with indignation, and Sanjay squeezed her palm soothingly, trying to pacify her. "Hey, Molly!" The old gypsy turned around and called out to someone. A young girl in a colorful skirt with tinkling bracelets on her slender, flexible arms and loose hair came running from the fire. "Give tea to these people. They are our guests," ordered the Baron. "I will not." Nina immediately refused, wrinkling her nose. Sanjay froze, struck by the appearance of the girl, whom the gypsy called Molly. He had only seen such beauties in movies before. The girl had a slightly dull golden skin, even as smooth as velvet. Her long hair fell in thick, wavy strands almost to her hips. Huge green eyes framed by black lashes looked at the world trustingly and joyfully. "Do gypsies have light-colored eyes?" Sanjay wondered, and immediately remembered that light-colored eyes with swarthy skin are a sign of breed. The girl's plump pink lips needed no lipstick. She was perfection. "Would you like some tea?" Molly addressed Sanjay politely. Her voice was lovely too, melodious as a bell, buoyant and tinkling. Suddenly, even to himself, he agreed. "I'll drink with pleasure." Nina immediately tugged his sleeve and sang, "Are you crazy? Do you want to poison yourself? At best you'll get an upset stomach. Who knows what they put in their tea? And is it even tea? The most ordinary Indian tea." The girl laughed when she heard her words and was not the least bit embarrassed. "And some molasses and some strawberries. It's delicious, really." She went to the cauldron hanging over the fire, scooped the tea with a ladle and poured it into a mug, then with a slight bow gave it to Sanjay. He accepted the hot drink from the girl's hands and took a cautious sip. The tea was indeed surprisingly tasty and fragrant. Sanjay even covered his eyes with pleasure. The drink of the gods. Do you want some? He turned to his wife, who stood by silently, but with all her appearance expressed disapproval of his actions. Instead of answering, Nina contemptuously pouted her lips and clucked, except that she didn't twist her finger at her temple. Thank you. Very tasty tea. Sanjay thanked the old gypsy and the girl heartily. Nina, it seemed, hardly waited for him to finish his drink because she immediately demanded, "Let's get out of here." It was awkward to leave like that right away, but it was also unwise to stay here when Nina was so angry and nervous. "Well, good evening and good night," Sanjay said in a slurred voice, addressing the whole gypsy tabor at once. At his feet was a tiny little boy, no older than 2 or 3 years old. Sanjay rummaged in the bag he and Nina had brought with them from home and handed him a gingerbread. He grabbed it with his swarthy hands, smiled happily, and ran off. "You are a good man, even though you are a gaji." The gypsy baron smiled. "What does that mean?" Sanjay tensed. "Gaji means not a gypsy. Peace be with you and your house." He said goodbye. Meanwhile, Nina, who had lost her patience, grabbed her husband by the arm and literally dragged him away from the tabor. At home, of course, Sanjay was waiting for a huge scandal. Nina, his gentle, meek Nina, this time did not hesitate in expressions. "Fool, idiot, cretin," she raged. "Have you gone completely crazy? Thank you for not throwing your arms around all these rabble. They're gypsies, you know, gypsies." She said the word as if they were lepers. "Come on, Nina." He tried to calm her down. "Nothing terrible happened. They even gave us tea. Very tasty, by the way. You don't know what awaits you after that tea." His wife sternly rebuked him. "Maybe you'll be running to the bathroom all night. And don't forget to wash your hands. Or better yet, take a shower. Jesus, I hope I didn't catch anything from them. The last thing we need is to get lice or scabies." "What are you talking about?" Sanjay was angry. "People were polite and hospitable, even though you behaved defiantly and openly rude. Why play a tragedy because of a cup of tea? And do you know how many mouths were drinking from this cup before you?" Nina asked wryly. "Ugh, I am wild and strange that I have to explain to you such obvious and elementary things. I only hope that soon these disgusting gypsies will get out of here." But Nina's hopes were not realized. Tabor, it seems, planned to stay in this picturesque corner all summer long. Why, the forest was full of mushrooms and berries, the lake was full of fish, and there was a sea of fresh, juicy green grass for the horses. Nina tried to resolve the issue with the gypsies by appealing to the head of the village to drive them away, if necessary with the help of the police. But the head only waved his hands guiltily. The lake and the surrounding areas were not private property. No one forbade to put tents or marquees on the shore, as long as fire safety rules were observed. He added, "What rules are there?" Nina was angry. "They'll burn us all. But when they do, then we'll deal with it." Nina was terribly annoyed that the gypsies didn't seem to bother anyone in the village except her. Perhaps it was because the others did not go to the lake as often as she and Sanjay did. However, after the tabor had settled on the shore, Nina had also refused to walk there. "No way." Categorically. You go," she declared to Sanjay, who the next day offered her a walk and fresh air. "I'm not going back in there. Not until that rabble's gone." "What's wrong with that rabble?" Sanjay was surprised. "They don't hang around the village. They don't ask for money. They sit on the shore. They shout songs and stink of campfires." Nina finished for him. "Well, they do stink." Sanjay shrugged his shoulders. "A pleasant smell of smoke and food cooked on the fire. And you can't hear the song from here. What are you making up? Why are you so protective of them?" My wife squinted suspiciously. "Have you fallen in love with that gypsy girl?" "What?" Sanjay was surprised. Nina jabbed her finger at him triumphantly. "That's what it is." Sanjay, tired, rolled his eyes. "Nina, sometimes I think you're delusional. What else do you have in mind? Why should I fall in love with her? Yes, I do remember the name, because that's what my father called her, and I don't seem to have a bad memory. But the rest is a figment of your sick imagination. You're the one who's sick. Go make out with your gypsy." "What are you talking about?" Sanjay finally freaked out. "Are you trying to make me angry on purpose? What's all this jealousy over nothing? Have I ever given you a reason to doubt my love? If you loved me, you would do as I say." Grumbling, Nina replied and turned away, signaling that the conversation was over. "So you're not going for a walk?" Sanjay asked. "We're used to going out every night." I said no. She cut him off. "Go alone." "Well, then I will." Sanjay was finally angry. In the Tabor he was greeted as an acquaintance. The gypsy baron came out to meet him and personally led him to the fire, inviting him to share the evening meal with them. Sanjay hesitated for a few moments and then gladly agreed to dine with the gypsies. The odor from the pot was very appetizing. Nina would probably have gone mad if she had seen her husband sitting down on the grass with his legs crossed in a Turkish style. The old gypsy sat down next to him. It must have been a sign of special favor. A tall, stately woman with her hair tied up in a scarf immediately served Sanjay and the gypsy each a clay bowl of aromatic soup, and brought hot cakes that smelled deliciously of smoke and charcoal. The baron said something softly and gratefully to her in gypsy, and Sanjay saw how fondly he looked at the woman and how fondly she looked back at him. "Is this your wife?" Sanjay guessed. "Yes." The gypsy nodded stiffly. "My Shantanu. Her name means calm. That's what she is. Judicious. Calm. She is the backbone of our household and children. All the women and girls in our community go to her for advice. She will always listen and help." Sanjay turned and looked at the woman. She and the other Roma continued to serve the men in order of seniority. First the elderly, then the younger. The last to receive their portions were the very young, gaunt young men. "What is your name?" Sanjay asked. "Agar. It means king. King," he explained. Well, that name suited him perfectly. Not without apprehension, Sanjay took the first spoonful, but after swallowing it he realized that he had never eaten such a delicious soup before. There were vegetables, cabbage, potatoes, some kind of cereals, and meat. "Delicious," he said sincerely. "Yes, gypsy women are good cooks. This is one of the main purposes in life," Agar said seriously. "What about education and career?" cautiously asked Sanjay. But the old gypsy only waved his hand. "They can read and write, and so be it. It is not customary for a woman to work. Let her cook, bring up her children, and love her husband. Then there will be peace, harmony in the family." Looking closer, Sanjay noticed in the crowd of women and girls that young beauty who had treated him to tea the day before. "What does her name mean?" he asked the gypsy. The gypsy smiled. "Molly. Very nice. My favorite, my youngest daughter, the most beautiful gypsy in the Tabor." He paused proudly. It was hard to argue with that. Sanjay himself saw that the girl was an extraordinary beauty. He also noticed that after serving the men, the gypsies sat down to dinner separately, a little apart. Even the wives did not sit next to their husbands, the women on one side and the men on the other. He still continued to gaze thoughtfully at the young gypsy woman's face. Suddenly she raised her huge green eyes and stared straight at him without a shadow of embarrassment. Sanjay choked on his soup, and Molly laughed loudly. Her laugh was like a crystal bell, too. "Why are the eyes green?" he asked Hagar and immediately apologized, embarrassed. "I apologize if it is a tactless question." The old gypsy looked at him. It was as if the subject was considering whether to trust him, but finally he answered. Her grandmother was not a gypsy, but she fell in love with a gypsy and ran away from home straight to the Tabor. Since then, all the girls in our family have eyes like emeralds. Your daughter is really beautiful." Sanjay couldn't help himself, and immediately felt foolish, as if the gypsy didn't know it himself. "Beautiful." He nodded stiffly. "They started asking for her even before my older daughters." "Matchmaking?" Sanjay asked, confused. "Yes." The old gypsy nodded again. "The wedding is scheduled for the fall. A good groom has asked for her hand in marriage. Reliable. So I'm giving her away." "What do you mean you're giving her away?" Sanjay's eyes popped out. He forgot all about the soup. Does she even like him? The gypsy shook his head, a mocking look on his face. "You don't know our gypsy customs. A daughter's parents choose the groom. And love? What about love? It comes in marriage. It's a disgrace to love before marriage. You young people can live together in sin and then never get married, but we don't do that here." "And if love does not come after marriage?" Sanjay stubbornly objected, not understanding why he was so hurt. "Is she going to suffer all her life with someone she doesn't love?" "I am not the enemy of my daughter," the gypsy said calmly. And Sural is a worthy, strong fellow. He will carry her in his arms. And here he is." The old gypsy nodded in the direction where his daughter's future husband was sitting. Sanjay followed his gaze and saw a young, handsome, really strong and sturdy-looking gypsy with sensible eyes. He was eating the soup with everyone else. But his eyes were fixed on his bride. He literally could not tear himself away from her. It was obvious that he really loves her. I wonder if she does. Sanjay discreetly turned his head, looking for the young gypsy girl, and again met the scrutinizing gaze of green eyes. Molly continued to stare at him. What would that mean? Why was she staring at him? He was embarrassed, lowered his eyes to his bowl of food and finished his soup in silence, not looking around and not asking anyone else about anything. Gradually he became addicted to these visits to the Tabor, and began to catch himself thinking that even at work he was looking forward to the evening. He was very interested in the gypsies. Everyone was very kind to him, and how they sang, you could listen to them, and how they fed him. Their food consisted of the simplest and most unpretentious products, but still, cooked over a fire, it seemed to Sanjay unusually tasty. He, of course, every time suggested to Nina not to go with him, but she stubbornly refused. "I don't understand," she said through clenched teeth. "How do you not disgusted to know this dirty tribe?" "Nina," Sanjay shook his head, "I just don't recognize you. Why do you have so much xenophobic prejudice in you? I assure you they are the nicest people and treat me very well. They even let me ride a horse yesterday," he added with a smile. "Well, go kiss your horses and your gypsies," Nina replied squeamishly. "Only after you've talked to them, don't bother me." In order not to upset his wife, he did not go to the lake every day, but whenever he stayed at home in the evenings, he felt drawn to the Tabor. He even learned a few gypsy words and expressions during this time. For example, he knew that Bojenko Mire meant my beautiful one. That was how the old gypsy often addressed his daughter. Chai Ore meant girl to father. Molly, however, still confused him with her strange look. It seemed as if her green eyes were literally haunting him. Not to say he didn't like it, but still Sanjay didn't understand what was going on, why she was looking at him like that. One day he couldn't help but make a joke when he found himself standing next to her. "Why are you always looking at me? Are you trying to guess?" Molly grinned. "Would you like me to tell your fortune?" "I can. I'm sorry, but I don't believe in that stuff." Sanjay snorted. "You shouldn't." Molly shook her head. "Come on, like I don't know how your gypsy people can fool you. You don't have to have any special gift or even a little understanding of psychology." "You shouldn't," Molly said again. "I'm good at fortune-telling. No one's ever complained. I can see the future without error." "You can see the future without a hitch?" He smiled incredulously. "Shall we test it?" she asked, clearly provoking him. Sanjay still hesitated. Molly said something in gypsy, and he was surprised to realize that he understood exactly what she said. "Don't be afraid. Give me your hand." Cautiously, not believing what he was doing, he held out his hand palm upward. Molly took it immediately and began to trace the intricacies of his destiny with her slender finger. "What is it?" Sanjay asked, trying not to show how excited he was by this simple touch. What is happening to him? He loves his wife. He loves her very much. So why, at the mere sight of this young gypsy woman, he loses his will? Maybe it's black gypsy magic. What if Molly had bewitched him? But he immediately scolded himself for such stupid thoughts. He didn't believe in such nonsense. Molly looked at his palm for a long time, silently, attentively, and suddenly her face changed. Then she gave a startled gasp. "What's the matter?" Sanjay was worried. "What did you see in my future?" Molly, not taking her eyes off his palm, shook her head and suddenly threw his hand away. "There'll be trouble, terrible trouble," she said in a trembling voice. "You can't be here anymore, Sanjay. You can't." She herself did not notice how she addressed him by his name out of excitement. Why shouldn't I? He was confused. What would be so terrible to happen to me here? "Please don't come to the Tabor again," she said almost in a whisper, and raised her incredible eyes at him, which were now full of tears. Was it because of him that she was crying? What a fool. "Okay, stop it," Sanjay said awkwardly. I told you I don't believe in all this fortune-telling and other nonsense. You don't have to, she responded. Just please don't come here. It's the only thing I ask of you. There was so much pleading in her voice, so much pain, that his heart ached. Both believing and not believing, Sanjay made her promise that from now on he would not appear in the Tabor again. Nina, of course, was happy. Though he had not told her the real reason why he had stopped going to the lake shore, he continued to long for the smell of the fires, for the horses neighing, for the tinkling of the bracelets on the hands of the gypsies, for their simple but delicious food, for intimate conversations with Agar, and, of course, for the gaze of their green eyes. What was she imagining, that silly girl? What could have happened to Sanjay in the Tabor? He went on the internet and read about gypsies, about their customs, traditions, habits. It seemed to him that in this way he was getting closer to their culture. He took a long look at pictures of modern gypsy women. None of them were even remotely as beautiful as Molly. Why be deceitful? He missed her. Meanwhile, his relationship with Nina had cooled slightly but very clearly. Sanjay himself didn't know what was wrong with them, but something was definitely wrong. It would seem that they were beginning to spend more time together. Past offenses and conflicts should have been forgotten, but it was the opposite. Nina was always thinking about something, and her face at such moments became as if she was many, many kilometers away from Sanjay. He tried to talk to her directly, asking her what was going on, but Nina only laughed unnaturally and waved it away. Everything's fine, why are you bothering? At work. You don't need that job. He was jokingly angry. Everything is going well there. The mechanism is fine. You don't have to be in the office all the time, especially in the evenings and on weekends. But Nina was still thoughtful and strange. Let's have a baby, shall we? Sanjay suggested to her. She shuddered slightly, but immediately pulled herself together. We just got married. What about living for ourselves? Sanjay shrugged. Well, we got married recently, but we've been together for so many years. To this Nina could not find anything to object, and only pressed her lips. It was true that we had never been able to have children. June was over, July passed by, August was coming to an end, and Nina only smiled guiltily in response to the mute question frozen in Sanjay's eyes, and shook her head negatively. One day, when his wife was in the shower, he urgently needed a Band-Aid. After going through the entire home medicine cabinet and failing to find what he needed, he randomly pulled out a desk drawer where Nina kept some of her feminine things like hygiene products. He pulled it out and was stunned, literally speechless. In the most prominent place there was a packet of birth control pills. Sanjay remembered perfectly well that a few months ago, Nina had thrown away a completely empty finished package in front of him and had not started a new one. And this pack was missing 10 pills. So she was secretly continuing to take them? He didn't understand anything anymore. Or rather, it seems that he began to understand why they could not have children. But he didn't understand why his wife was behaving so strangely. So she was lying to Sanjay that she was not getting pregnant, but in fact she was swallowing the pills? Grabbing a packet of pills, he moved towards the bathroom to ask Nina this question without delay. He wanted to knock. But then, through the noise of flowing water, he suddenly heard his wife's voice. Was she talking to someone? Sanjay was even more surprised. Nina was never in the habit of carrying her cell phone into the bathroom. He listened, but because of the water pressure he couldn't make out anything. He could only make out his wife's tone, cheerful, almost flirtatious. Who was she talking to? And then suddenly it struck him. What if the shower was just an excuse? What if she was opening both faucets full force on purpose, to drown out the sound of her own voice so Sanjay wouldn't realize? He pressed his ear against the door, but it was still almost impossible to make out the words. Only at the end he thought that Nina said affectionately, "All right, kisses." What the hell is going on here? He thought irritably and pushed the door open. The door turned out to be locked from the inside, though they didn't usually lock themselves in the bathroom. Sanjay knocked loudly, and the sound of water immediately subsided. "Who's there?" the wife asked fearfully. "What do you mean? Who?" Sanjay was surprised. "Oh yes, I'll be right out," she hurriedly replied. Clicking the latch, Nina, dressed in a white terry cloth robe, slipped out of the bathroom and stared at him anxiously. "What's wrong?" And he stared at her in silence, somehow unable to utter a word. It would seem easier to ask, "Who were you talking to?" Or, why didn't you tell me you were still taking the pills? But it was like his tongue had been taken away. Or maybe Sanjay was just afraid to hear the truth. He looked at Nina's hair and saw that it was completely dry. So she hadn't even showered. The noise of the water was just for conspiracy purposes. "What is it, Sanjay?" asked Nina already with a slight irritation. "Why are you looking at me like that? Don't I have the right to take a shower in my own house? And why is your hair dry?" he blurted out. For a moment it seemed to him that his wife was confused, looked away. But after a second she pulled herself together. "What kind of a stupid question is that? I was putting on my bathing cap." With a shrug, she walked around him and headed towards the bedroom. Sanjay entered the bathroom as if in a stupor and stared dumbly at the rubber cap that always hung on a hook near the mirror. The cap was also completely dry. Without remembering himself, Sanjay walked forward, not even recognizing the road, just wherever his eyes were. It was impossible to stay at home now. He realized that he wouldn't be able to hold back, and he would make a scandal, because at the moment he just couldn't think in cold blood. He realized that for such serious conversations and clarification of relationships, you need a clear head and a cold mind. Now he could say things that could never be corrected. No, the first thing to do was to calm down and pull himself together. What if it wasn't what it seemed? What if he's just making up something that isn't there? Yes, Nina's behavior was strange and highly suspicious. But that's not to say that she has a lover. Perhaps she has her own reasons for her behavior, and she will reveal them to Sanjay? She would. When he stopped, he found that his feet had led him straight to the shore of the lake. At least it wasn't a gypsy camp. That was a little to the right, about half a kilometer away. The smells of the fire, the laughter, the sounds of singing and the neighing of horses were distant and indistinct. No, as much as Sanjay missed Molly, he didn't want to meet her in this state. But he must have a crazy look in his eyes, his face red from anger and fast walking, his breath hitched. Anyone would be frightened. He went down to the lake, squatted down and took a handful of cool water and splashed it vigorously in his face several times, trying to calm down and regain his composure. Suddenly the bushes rattled behind him. Sanjay turned around and saw the branches swaying. Someone, hidden by the dense greenery, was climbing the narrow path up the cliff. It was said that some daredevils even jumped from the cliff straight into the water. The water was deep, but Sanjay had never ventured into it, even though he could swim very well. And Nina would not let him, because she was afraid that he would hit his head on the bottom and break his neck. At the thought of Nina, he involuntarily wrinkled his nose as if from a burn. He didn't want whoever was climbing the cliff to see him at the bottom. After a moment's thought, Sanjay stepped back a little, hiding under the trees. He could not be seen from above now. Finally, voices came from up above. It turned out there was not one person, but two, a man and a woman. Or rather, not a woman, but a girl. Sanjay immediately recognized Molly's mesmerizing timbre. True, now the girl was not speaking like a dove, but was loudly and angrily reprimanding something to her companion. The man's voice was unfamiliar to Sanjay. He only realized that it was not the gypsy girl's father, Agar, but someone else, younger. "Our parents have already agreed on everything," the man said nervously to the gypsy woman. "You can't just cancel everything like that." "Why not?" Molly objected. "You are promised to me, and you will belong to me." "What am I? Your slave. Your slave. You are my bride." A man's voice objected harshly, and Sanjay realized to whom it belonged. The young gypsy man whom Father Agar had called his daughter's fiancé. Thus Sanjay became an unwitting witness to the quarrel of two lovers. The bride is not a prisoner, it seems, and was not going to give up. "If I change my mind about getting married, no one will force me to do it by force." "Why not?" "Why?" Saral cried out. "What happened? Everything was fine. Why can't we get married as planned?" The girl said the next words quietly, but Sanjay heard them anyway. "Because I don't love you." "Who do you love?" The gypsy exploded. "That married Gaji? You've lost all shame." Sanjay could hardly remember that Gaji in their language did not mean gypsy. Who did Saral mean? Was it him, Sanjay? "It's none of your business." Molly cut him off, trying to remain calm, but Sanjay could hear in her voice that she was agitated. In any case, Marriage was out of the question. I won't marry you. I'll tell my father today. You won't go, you say? There was a threatening note in Sural's voice. But we'll see about that. You'll go like a sweetheart. What do you mean? This. The reply came, and Sanjay heard some noise and commotion above his head. What are you doing? The girl exclaimed desperately. I'm going to possess you right here like some slutty girl. Let me go. No, I won't let you go now, shouted Surala. Don't you understand? I'll raise a shout. The whole Tabor is coming here now. Well, try it. There was a sinister sneer in his voice. But you'll only embarrass yourself. Come with me on a date, that is, with a man alone in a secluded corner, away from human eyes. No, Surala, Molly said in disgust. I'll say you offered yourself to me. The boy went on without listening. Do you think anyone will treat you with respect after such a disgrace? Do you think anyone would want to take you into their family? Oh, you! I could hear Molly gasping with indignation. What a wretch you are, such a wretch. And she added something. Sanjay, who had not heard the Romani language for months, was surprised to realize that he understood what had been said. Molly wished that the gypsy would be punished by God. But in response to her curse, Sural only laughed mockingly. If God is going to punish me, it won't be for a long time. But you will be punished right now for your insolence and stubbornness. Come here, Molly cried, frightened. Sanjay couldn't take it anymore. Leaping out of his hiding place, he quickly flew up the tube and found himself on top of the cliff in front of Sural and Molly. Put the girl down, he demanded, glaring at the young man. Look who's here to see us. The gypsy was insulted. A protector. What a surprise. Aren't you ashamed to leave your wife alone while you yourself shamelessly pursue a young gypsy bride? A stranger's bride, by the way. He squeezed Molly's hand and shook it roughly, causing her to shriek. Sanjay shook his head. I wasn't dragging around anyone. Let her go. He repeated. Let her go and you and I will talk man to man. Surala's jaw clenched and his veins flared. Do you consider yourself a man? He spat contemptuously in Sanjay's face. Do you? He answered the question with a question. Are you a man? You lure a girl, intimidate her, try to take her by force. Is that what real gypsies do? He said wryly. Sural turned pale. The pride of the entire gypsy family, not his own, had been hurt. Don't you dare, you damned Gaji. Don't you dare even mention my people with your filthy tongue. Sanjay crossed his arms over his chest and stubbornly looked the angry gypsy in the eye. What are you going to do to me? Kill you? I'll kill you, whispered Sural. I swear to God I'll kill you. Go away, woman. He shoved Molly away from him, and the girl was barely able to keep her footing. Don't interfere when men are talking. The gypsy woman appeared to be in deep shock. She watched the young men with widened eyes, shifting her gaze from one to the other. Sanjay. Please don't, she said, almost out of breath. But the man sent her a reassuring smile. It's going to be all right. Or do you really think he can kill me? And the second he did, he felt a hard fist slam into his stomach. They clung to each other and fell to the grass at the edge of the cliff, risking a fall every now and then. Sanjay hadn't really fought in a long time, probably not since he was a teenager, when he and the boys used to beat each other up. But he'd been to a boxing class, and he hadn't completely forgotten the rules of combat. It was hard to follow them, though, because Sural was beating him heartily without any rules. The young gypsy was energized by anger. He was full of emotion, so he did not feel the blows Sanjay was throwing back at him. But at last Sural lost his fervor and ran out of steam. Sanjay took advantage of this and deftly pulled the guy under him, pinning his hands to the ground, not allowing him to break free. Out of anger, Sural tried to spit in his face, but Sanjay dodged it in time. That's it, you be quiet, he said to the guy almost peacefully, trying to catch his breath. I hate you, you damned Gaji, whispered the guy, still trying to break free. But it was no use. Sanjay's grip was ironclad. Now remember, Sanjay said in a clear voice after regaining his breath. I never want to see you near Molly again. Ever again. Leave the girl alone. Don't let a single hair fall from her head. Do you understand? Otherwise you'll be dealing with me again. And believe me, next time I won't be as merciful as I am now. Where did you come from? With hatred in his eyes, Sural exhaled. Everything was going so well. But you came along and ruined everything. You've ruined my whole life. Sanjay hummed thoughtfully and shook his head. Well, it wasn't as good as you say. Where there's a thin line, there's a tear. You must have heard the saying. So Molly never really wanted to be yours. She didn't love you. The words made the gypsy even more furious, and he jerked with renewed vigor, trying to free himself from Sanjay's grasp. "Do you think you'll get her?" he shouted. "But it will never happen. Agar will never give up his beloved daughter for a Gaji. He will never agree to your marriage. You're already married, and Molly won't go out with you without marriage. Gypsies don't live in sin. For God's sake, Sanjay, let him go." Molly, who had been silently watching the fight, pleaded, "Let him go on his way. I can't see him and I don't want to see him. I'll let you go if you promise not to do anything stupid." Sanjay looked at Saral warningly. He averted his gaze smugly. "Understood." Sanjay shook him by his shoulders again. "Promise?" "Yeah, I got it. I got it." He mumbled, "I promise. Let go already." Sanjay pulled his hands away. Saral rose slowly from the ground and stared at Molly with a frown. She met his gaze bravely, proudly raising her chin. A weak girl, but not broken and unwilling to indulge in brute male strength and assertiveness. Sanjay got to his feet too, shaking off his palms and knees. "Remember, you promised," he said warningly. "I won't see you near Molly again. Now go to the tabor." No one had time to realize what had happened next. Saral made a deceptive movement as if he were turning around and actually going to leave. But instead he turned around, rushed toward Sanjay and pushed him hard in the chest. Sanjay staggered backward. His foot slipped on the edge of the cliff. He swung his arms absurdly, trying to keep his balance, but the clay began to crumble under the soles of his shoes and crumble. "Look out!" Molly shouted, rushing toward him to try to hold him down, to grab his arm, to keep him from falling. And she was not in time. For a fraction of an instant she was not in time. Her hand slipped through the air. Her fingers clenched helplessly, and Sanjay flew swiftly downward. The next months of Sanjay's life merged into some kind of endless, soul and body-weary day of constant repetition. When he came to, he found that he could not move an arm or a leg. And then there was pain, endless pain throughout his body, in every cell of his body. There seemed to be no place in his body that didn't ache. The white, too bright light was hitting his face, making him squint, remembering what preceded this awakening. Sanjay realized that he had fallen off a cliff and apparently hit the bottom. What Nina had always feared had happened. Had his spine been broken? He tried to turn his head and couldn't. He felt helpless in general. Sanjay wanted to call for help, but his tongue wouldn't listen. His throat was dry, and instead of intelligible sounds, some unintelligible wheezes came out of his mouth. Then he heard voices. He had already guessed that he was in a hospital room, both from the atmosphere and the peculiar odor. Listening, he recognized his wife's voice and some unfamiliar male voice. A very informal one. "Tell me, is there no hope at all?" Nina said in a stricken voice. "It's too early to make any predictions," the man replied. Sanjay realized that it must be a doctor. But will he ever be able to move, to walk on his own? Tears were clearly ringing in his wife's voice. "Listen, Mrs. Nina." The doctor spoke more softly. "It's not in my principles to give optimistic prognoses if I'm not 200% sure of them. I'm not going to lie. But your husband's condition is extremely serious. His life, fortunately, is not in danger. But as far as recovery is concerned." The doctor hesitated for a moment. "First of all, it's not a quick process. Secondly, you need a special course of rehabilitation. This is not our job, not our profile. There are special therapeutic sanatoriums that help patients recover from paralysis. Thirdly, the human body is still not a fully understood subject. Even doctors are sometimes stunned by what can happen to it. You see, absolutely anything is possible. Any outcome, all kinds of scenarios. That your husband will return to a full life, or that he will forever remain a bedridden invalid." Nina gave a muffled shriek and seemed to cry. Sanjay didn't hear it anymore because he was overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. Disabled. He's a helpless invalid, forever confined to his own bed. It can't be. This is some stupid, monstrous mistake. The idiot doctors made a mistake. What's it all for? Such a miserable, such an insignificant life. "Calm down," said the doctor. "According to my calculations, he should wake up soon. You must appear strong, confident, and optimistic. Understand? Very often the recovery of the patient depends largely on his own desire, on his personal mood. Psychosomatics in action. If your spouse himself will want to get on his feet, it is possible that the case will go on the mend much faster. But it's not certain? Questioned Nina. Unfortunately, I'm not God. I can't tell you exactly what the future holds. But keep believing and hoping. And of course, surround him with care, love, warmth. Sanjay should feel that he is not alone, that you love him very much. Be close to him. Especially now he is absolutely helpless. He will need help even to do some elementary things. You have to feed him, take care of his hygiene, toilet. I have to. In Nina's voice you could clearly hear confusion and fear, almost panic. But I have a job to do, my business with Sanjay. I can't leave it. And I don't know how to wash, feed, take care of anything. I've never had a bedridden patient in my family. I don't even know how to approach him. Plus, I'm squeamish. The thought of changing the toilet makes me sick to my stomach. Tell me. Her voice suddenly brightened up. How about hiring a special nurse to take care of him? It's up to you. The doctor replied dryly. If you can find someone who will look after your husband, why not? Maybe you can recommend someone to me? Nina jumped at the idea. Only you'll need 24-hour care with accommodation, the doctor clarified. Why live-in care? Nina was confused. Well, we cannot keep your husband in the hospital all the time. Sooner or later we'll have to discharge him. Discharge him? Even if everything stays the same? What's the point of him staying with us? We've done everything we can. Everything we can do, we'll do. But if his condition doesn't improve, there's no point in him being in the hospital. But at home, the walls help. You know the saying? All right, Nina said nervously. Let's have a live-in nurse. It will cost you a lot of money, warned the doctor. Money is not a problem for me, Nina said quickly. So will you help me find a live-in nurse? Maybe one of your staff will do it? No way, the doctor said sternly. Our staff has enough work to do. We don't provide this kind of service. Look on the internet. Call the numbers listed in the advertisements. Conduct interviews. God, what a lot of trouble, moaned Nina. How I wish I could get rid of this headache once and for all. Instead of this, we'll have to deal with ads, calls, interviews. This is your husband we're talking about, not some stranger off the street, the doctor reminded me coldly. However, even such a man deserves to be treated humanly. Okay, with annoyance, said Nina. I'll deal with it somehow. So you say Sanjay is still asleep? Yes, but he should wake up soon. The anesthesia's about to wear off. Would you like to see him? But you could hear in her voice that Nina was hesitating. I think I'll go in and see him for a while, but don't worry him unnecessarily. The doctor warned again. Don't have any tears, dramas, hysterics at his bedside. Keep your cool. The next second, the doors to the ward creaked softly. Sanjay barely had time to close his eyes, pretending to be asleep. He himself didn't know why he had done so. The news that he had become a helpless invalid had crushed him. He himself had not yet gotten used to the idea. He didn't understand it, didn't accept it, didn't realize it. And then he found out that his wife shunned to take care of him, considered him a burden, dreaming of hiring a nurse. It was something to despair about. Sanjay felt Nina walk quietly through the room and stop beside his bed. She must have been examining his face, but he was afraid to open his eyes to check, and still pretended to be sound asleep. For a moment she leaned over him so close that Sanjay could feel her breath on his face. Did she suspect that he was no longer asleep, but only pretending? But no. Nina just looked at him for a few moments, and then sharply tapped her heels and left the room. Left alone, Sanjay opened his eyes with difficulty. The realization of what had happened slowly but surely dawned on him. He was bedridden, unable to move any of his limbs. His neck won't listen to him either. He's just a helpless, weak carcass. God, I wish he'd died right away. Crashed to death. What kind of life is it if you spend the rest of your life like this? A miserable, helpless, useless existence. A burden to everyone, especially your beloved wife. That's true. Did she marry to carry a toilet out from under him? And what about in sickness and in health, in sorrow and in joy? An inner voice told him snidely. After all, you had taken marriage vows to each other. But Sanjay was not thinking about that. He felt his eyes getting moist, and he cried silently. Nina didn't visit him again that day. Apparently, she talked herself out of work and important household matters. But when she found him awake, doctors, nurses, nurses, and other staff flashed into his room. They all made exaggeratedly cheerful eyes and cheerfully told him that he should not despair, that the body is young, strong, and should continue to fight. To listen to them, it was just a matter of bracing oneself, not to give in and to look into the future with idiotic optimism. But Sanjay didn't want to be strong or fight. He wanted only one thing, that everyone left him alone and did not interfere in his soul. Finally, by evening, the excitement had died down a little. All the nursing staff went about their business. Sanjay refused dinner at first, but the doctor insisted that he swallow at least a little. He had to agree. But not because he was hungry, but because he was tired of arguing. He was getting tired quickly in general, even though he wasn't really doing anything. He just lay there. The nurse was spoon-feeding him, and that was another blow. Would every basic action in his life now be accompanied by such humiliation? So Sanjay ate only a couple of spoonfuls and refused the rest. Then, clenching his teeth, he had to endure being washed and served the toilet. He wanted to howl, scream, and cry at the same time. What was he in for? Why? Finally, night fell. Only the doctors and nurses on duty were left in the hospital, and the main staff had gone home. "Mr. Sanjay?" A nurse approached him shyly. "Do you mind if I leave you for a while? I still have a few patients left. Some need an overnight injection, some need medication, some need their IVs renewed." "Go!" Sanjay said hoarsely. "I don't need you." It sounded harsh. He realized it himself. But the nurse didn't seem offended. "I'll be back in about an hour," she said. "I think you'll be fine. But in case anything should happen." She thought for a moment, then shook her head emphatically. "Nothing will happen. Just rest. Try to sleep soon. You need your strength. Good night." In a colorless tone, Sanjay wheezed back. If only she would go away soon. How tiresome it was to endure these sympathetic voices and glances. He's only one day in this state, and he already wants to hang himself from other people's pity. And the worst part, Sanjay thought with bitter irony, that even if I really wanted to kill myself, I wouldn't be able to do it. That thought certainly didn't make him feel any better. Was this really his life now? His reality? And not some nightmare? "Turn off the light, please," he asked the nurse. She frowned as she stopped in the doorway. "Are you sure, Sanjay? Maybe you'd feel better with the light on?" "I'm sleepy," he said slowly. Lying, of course. There was no sleep in either eye, but it was too much for him to look at the electric lights on the walls of the hospital room, which had already bored him for a day. He didn't want to see any more of it. All right. The nurse hesitated, flicked the switch, and the room fell into darkness. "Good night, sweet dreams." Sanjay almost howled. Sweet dreams. Is she kidding? But then he realized that the nurse had not said it out of malice, not out of a desire to make fun of him. Rather, just out of habit. He did not answer her anything, pretended that he was already falling asleep. The nurse left the room and quietly shut the door behind her. Left alone at last, Sanjay gave vent to tears again. It was stupid and infantile. After all, he was no longer a snotty schoolboy. But he just couldn't help himself. The future seemed utterly horrible to him, hopeless. If there was a hell on earth, here it was at Sanjay's complete disposal. As it happened, at that very moment his nose itched terribly below the bridge of his nose, and now he couldn't even scratch it himself. His hands wouldn't listen. The idiocy and hopelessness of the situation made Sanjay laugh nervously. Rather, it was almost hysterical, and the damned itching was getting worse. Sanjay was beginning to feel that if he didn't manage to scratch his nose somehow, he would simply die on the spot. Could he have imagined a sillier situation? Suddenly he thought he heard a light tap on the window frame. At first, Sanjay thought it was a branch hitting the glass or just a wind noise, but the tapping was repeated, squinting his eyes as far as he could. Sanjay looked at the black window opening. His eyes were more or less used to the darkness, and it was brighter outside because of the hospital lights. It seemed to Sanjay that something shapeless, large and dark was moving outside the window. For a second, all his half-forgotten childhood fears of monsters and monstrosities came back to him. but he immediately mentally berated himself for it. A grown man, and he was afraid of some shadow. But the shadow continued to fidget on the other side of the glass. Then Sanjay heard the window slowly open. That's when he got really scared. Not a monster, but an ordinary man. But would a man with good and pure thoughts climb through the window? What is it? A robber, a serial killer. Meanwhile, the frame opened wide, and a dark figure climbed up on the windowsill and jumped to the floor of the room. "I'll call security now," Sanjay said hoarsely and loudly, bluffing desperately. How would he call her? By yelling? Yelling as hard as he could was a good option, though. Maybe it would scare the unknown intruder. But before Sanjay could get more air into his lungs and really catch fire, the figure tore toward the bed and quickly placed a palm, soft and warm, against his lips. Even before the figure spoke, he recognized the scent and then the voice. "Hush, hush, Sanjay. It's me. Don't be afraid." And slowly she took her hand away from his mouth. "Molly," he said, both believing and disbelieving. It was really her, the young gypsy girl. Her huge eyes and long skirt gleamed familiarly in the semi-darkness. What are you doing here?" he said. "Came to see you," she said simply. "Through the window?" He was amazed. "Well, how else? If they won't let me in through the door," she said passionately, but then she realized and lowered her voice. "There's a cordon of guards. They saw me at the door and made such a fuss, saying, 'Where are you going?' Beggar, thief." Her voice became sad. "Do I really look like a thief and a beggar?" "No, of course not, of course not," he retorted. He felt immensely grateful now that she had not begun at once to ooze and ah at him, to shed tears, to pity him, and the fact that she had spoken of herself first had given him a chance to come to his senses and collect his thoughts. "You don't look the same," Sanjay repeated firmly. His voice had even strengthened. "There are so many stereotypes in people's heads. They see a gypsy and immediately suspect the worst. So they didn't let you in? They didn't let me in." She sighed. "First of all, because of my appearance, and secondly, I'm nobody to you," she finished quietly. "And only family members are allowed in here. It's very strict. But I found a way out anyway. Good thing you're only on the first floor and the windows aren't barred," she added triumphantly. "I thought you were a burglar." Sanjay grinned. "What else did you think you could steal in a hospital room? How I curse myself for not keeping you safe," Molly said softly, fondly touching his unmoving hand. "I told you, I warned you not to come to the Tabor, or trouble would happen." "I didn't come to the Tabor," Sanjay objected. "I was just in the neighborhood and overheard your conversation." There was a heavy silence. Both Sanjay and Molly mentally returned to the terrible scene at the cliff. "Where is he now?" Sanjay asked cautiously, referring to the young gypsy. "Where? Where?" The voice was full of contempt. "He ran away like a cowardly jackal." "What do you mean, ran away?" "In the direct sense. He was afraid I'd tell my father how it was and that our people would curse him, so he ran away. Nobody knows where he is now, but he's certainly far away from here. Maybe he's joined some other gypsy camp. He's not coming back to us anyway. Such a shame and embarrassment for him. He almost took me by force. He almost killed you. But he almost killed me." Sanjay sighed. "I may be technically alive, but I'm actually alive. How can that be life? I'm as good as dead." "Not anymore," she exclaimed. "Don't say that. You breathe, you talk, you understand, you feel. That's the main thing. Everything else is fixable." She said it so confidently and convincingly that Sanjay, despite the pessimistic mood that possessed him, felt a little lighter at heart. "What do they say in your Tabor about Saral?" he asked the girl. She sighed. "Everyone is shocked. Of course, no one expected this from him. He had always seemed like a normal guy. But I guess he's a little short of brains after all," she added contemptuously. "There's a reason they say you can't be too smart when you're strong." "I'm sorry, Sanjay." Immediately she found his palm and brought it to her lips. "Forgive me for what?" He was surprised. "For what? You got into that fight with Saral because of me. Did I put you into it? You had nothing to do with it." "Don't blame yourself," he said firmly. "I'm a big boy, you know, and I'm responsible for my own actions and deeds." They were silent for a while. Finally, Sanjay asked something that had been on his mind for a long time. What happened after I fell at all? I don't remember anything. You fell? I jumped after you, Molly just said. Crazy. He was amazed. You could have been hurt or killed too. Molly shrugged. But I didn't. What happened then? I pulled you to shore. Saral had vanished by then. I screamed loudly, and our people from the Tabor came running to the shore. I asked my father to call an ambulance and I ran to your wife. Call an ambulance? Sanjay was surprised. But how? The younger one was even a little offended. What do you take us for savages? Gypsies also buy cell phones in case you didn't know. I'm sorry. Sanjay's embarrassed. I said something without thinking. There was silence again. You know, Molly said quietly. We're leaving. Who are we? He didn't understand. We're a Tabor, the girl explained, a pang in his chest. Are you leaving for good? Cautiously, he clarified. Well, first of all, the summer is over. Soon the cold will come. And secondly, she hesitated, clearly doubting whether to tell Sanjay about it. But tell him first. He grinned. Your wife's got everyone on edge. The whole village, everyone against us, Molly said quietly. Honestly, Sanjay wasn't even surprised. The gypsy camp by the lake had always been a bone in Nina's throat. Wow. It turned out that she had made such a big deal out of it. When did she do that? Dad's very concerned about what's happened, Molly went on. He's afraid the police will be interested in our people. And even though it was Saral who did it, they'll pick on everyone. Do you know what I mean? She asked hesitantly. Gypsies are always wary. People are wary of us and don't expect any good. I understand, he said quietly. I think you're probably right to leave. He did say it, but he felt so bitter and empty. After what had happened to him, Sanjay already felt incredibly lonely. After all, his wife had made it clear that she considered him a burden and did not want to deal with a helpless invalid. And now she will leave, and then he will definitely be left alone with his misfortune. It was as if the whole world had turned its back on him. I'm sorry, Molly, he said in a muffled voice. I'm tired. I don't feel well, and I'd like to sleep. I understand, she responded. Good night. She wanted to say something else, but footsteps were heard outside the door, and the girl darted to the window. The door was ajar. Sanjay? The nurse called him in a whisper. Are you asleep? I thought you were talking to someone. He pretended as if she had woken him up and said sleepily, I'm not talking to anyone. Maybe in your sleep? Your windows are open, she noticed. I'll close them, don't worry. Sanjay did not answer her, closed his eyes and wished mentally that he would wake up and find that everything that had happened to him was just a bad dream. Nina was sitting on the veranda of her house and smoking. She always grabbed a cigarette when she was nervous. And in the last few weeks, all she'd been doing was nervous. What was this thing? It's like someone's jinxed her. Nothing's working out, everything's falling apart, all her plans are falling through. And then Sanjay broke his spine. Nina perceived her husband's misfortune as an annoying nuisance, interfering with her personal happiness. In a few days, she and Harry should fly to the Maldives, a romantic vacation for two, turquoise ocean, palm trees, the man she loves. What could be more beautiful? But the matter was complicated by the fact that Nina had not yet found a 24-hour nurse for her husband. She was ready to pay any price, but all the candidates refused, having learned that she would have to work 24/7 without weekends. Some were willing to work 5 days a week or only day shifts, so they could go home at night. But the problem was that Sanjay could not be left alone at all. He was completely helpless. There was, of course, the most extreme option, to take Sanjay to a special institution, where they take care of helpless patients who have no relatives. Yes, it was expensive, but she could afford it. But Nina could not dare to take this step. Sanjay understood everything. His consciousness was perfectly fine. How would she explain her decision to him? Sorry, darling, I'll put you in a home for the handicapped. God knows if Sanjay had lost his mind, was in a coma, or didn't understand what was going on, she would have done it without a second thought. But now she was afraid to look him in the eye, especially since he was still technically part owner of their company. Is it possible to just take him and put him in some kind of hospital, and even without his consent? Nina sharply, angrily stifled her cigarette and quickly wiped the unsolicited tears from her eyes. What should she do? Should she give up the trip to the Maldives? Give up her dream, her happiness? Suddenly, Nina saw that on the other side of the fence someone was standing. It looked like a woman's figure. Looking closely, she aghast. It was the same young gypsy woman from the Tabor, from whom her husband had lost his head, though he did not want to admit it even to himself. Nina quickly ran off the porch and approached the fence. "What are you doing here?" she asked hostilely. "Didn't your Tabor get the hell out of here?" The girl wrapped her arms around her shoulders as if she were cold. Maybe she was cold. It was September, the summer heat was gone, and the gypsy was wearing only a motley skirt and a colorful blouse. Yes, the Tabor had really left, the girl said quietly, and I ran away. What do you mean you ran away? Just ran away from the Tabor and the family, from my relatives and friends. It didn't seem to Nina that the gypsy girl could hardly hold back her tears. Why did she run away? She didn't understand. I couldn't leave, knowing that Sanjay was in such a state. I really need to know how he is, she said eagerly. Nina grinned. How is he? No change. He'll stay that way. But there is always hope. Molly objected timidly. What's it to you? The gypsy looked away. Are you in love with him? Nina asked bluntly. The girl bravely held her gaze. In love, not in love. They are different things, she declared, proudly raising her chin. Nina couldn't stand it and laughed bitterly. What do you know about love, girl? What do you know about it? The gypsy girl objected. As soon as her husband became an invalid, he became unnecessary. Is that how real loving wives behave? Nina was not even offended. She shook her head slowly. Can you imagine what it's like to meet a man you've loved since childhood and who left for another country many years ago? You thought you'd never see him again, but he's back, and you're already married. The gypsy frowned incomprehensibly. Excuse me, what do you mean? I mean who? Me, of course. Nina smiled. Harry and I grew up together. Our parents were friends. I was sure from the age of 5 that I was going to be his wife in the future. We went to kindergarten together, then to school. We were always like parrots, inseparable. And then what? The gypsy asked, because Nina had stopped talking. The gypsy woke up, as if she had already forgotten about her presence. Then, she answered sadly. Then their family moved away, and Harry left with his parents too. I was sure I'd lost him forever. Did you love him very much? The gypsy asked. Very much. Nina nodded. I still love him. I never stopped loving him. What about Sanjay? I married him because he seemed to me a good and reliable man. In fact, he is. A good, reliable man who dreams of a strong family and children. But unloved. I can't command my heart. The girl shook her head without judgment, but also without sympathy. Was it fair to him? Probably not. Nina sighed. But then I thought that Harry and I would never meet again, that I could love Sanjay someday. And now Harry has flown here on business for his firm. We met by chance downtown at a coffee shop. And you realize that first love never rusts. The gypsy finished for her. Nina grinned. That's exactly right. Can you imagine how confused I am? On the one hand, the love of my life, and on the other, a good, kind, but unloved husband, who is not to blame for the fact that I do not love him. I was honestly going to tell him about everything, ask for a divorce, peacefully negotiate and solve everything as civilized people. And then all of a sudden this disaster. She sobbed. Harry's bought tickets to the Maldives. We're supposed to leave the day after tomorrow. I didn't make him any promises, but he said he'd wait for me at the airport anyway. If I don't come, it means I'm telling him no and he won't bother me anymore and we'll fly back alone later. But how can I come? I can't even find a caregiver for Sanjay, let alone start a conversation with him about divorce. That would be terribly mean of me. I mean, he's got no one but me. What will become of him if I leave him? The gypsy woman was silent for a long time, digesting what she had heard. Well, if you really love your Harry, she said slowly, I think you should go to the Maldives with him. I think a vacation together would set things right. Are you laughing? Nina waved her hand in helplessness. Where would I go? And Sanjay? I can look after Sanjay, the gypsy woman barely audibly said and blushed. Nina's eyes widened. Are you serious? You're crazy. Why? Well, for one thing, this place needs a professional nurse. Nonsense, the girl interrupted. First of all, Sanjay needs care and nurturing, all of which I can provide. The girl. Nina looked down at her. It's not a pleasant job. You got to potty him and bathe him. And everything. I know. She interrupted. Don't think I'm an idiot. I'm ready to do all this for him. Nina shook her head in shock. Do you love him that much? Gypsy lowered her eyelashes. The answer was clear without words. God, I must be crazy if I let myself be dragged into this adventure. Nina moaned, covering her head with her hands. I don't know you at all. What if you're a thief? But you have no other way out anyway. Smiled the girl, not even offended at the thief. Yes, you're right. How much do you want for your work? The gypsy shook her head. I won't charge you a dime for the work. Just leave money for food and medicine for 2 weeks. I promise you, no, I swear. You won't have to worry about Sanjay. I'll take good care of him. 2 weeks in the Maldives flew by like a blink of an eye. Nina felt like she was in a fairy tale. She didn't even want to think about the fact that soon she and Harry would be back and apart. She realized that any fairy tale would end sooner or later. She and her lover would never be together. These 2 weeks had been for them 2 weeks in paradise, a beautiful dream. But unfortunately, it was time to wake up. Nina had a sick, helpless husband waiting for her at home. She could not leave him, although her heart was forever attached to another man. Remembering Sanjay, Nina decided to check the surveillance cameras in the house. They were installed in almost every room, and one could watch what was going on through an app on her cell phone. Embarrassed, Nina thought of her husband for the first time in 2 weeks. I hope I don't see a ransacked house and Sanjay's demise now. Gloomily, she thought. Opening the app, Nina displayed the broadcast from all the rooms at the same time. But strangely, neither Sanjay nor the young gypsy woman could be seen in any of them. Nina frowned. All right, the girl was understandable. She could have gone out to the store or the drugstore, for example. But where is Sanjay? The camera installed in the bedroom showed that his bed was empty. Jesus, Nina gasped. What if he really is dead? But she immediately berated herself for such a wild assumption. Nina decided to check the outside cameras on the porch and porch. No one. What if she looked in the garden? Nina clicked on the desired icon and almost lost speech, at first not believing her eyes. Molly and Sanjay were strolling along the garden paths. Shocked, Nina immediately turned off the app and with trembling fingers dialed her husband's number. That day, Sanjay took his first long walk all the way to the lake since his injury. Before that, he had only walked around the garden, held under the arm of his caring gypsy. I didn't believe that I would ever come here on my own feet. He smiled, looking fondly at Molly. She smiled back, rubbing her cheek against his hand. I knew the impossible was possible. I always believed it. Sanjay chuckled. You not only believed it, you acted on it. All your massages, your healing herbs, your special exercises, your magic. I guess I will never be able to thank you enough for what you did for me. Your happy eyes are the best thanks, Molly said. I remember how lifeless and dead they were. You thought your life was over. It was you who brought me back to life. He brought her palm to his mouth and kissed her fingertips. I'm so grateful to fate that I met you once, right here on this very shore. And I'm grateful to her for the same thing, she whispered. Sanjay took her face in his palms and kissed her. I can't wait until Nina gets back and we formalize the divorce. We agreed to settle things amicably, without scandal, because she's going to fly off with her Harry. She'll even give me her share of the company. And then what? She asked flirtatiously. You will agree to marry me, won't you? Of course, my love, she whispered shyly, lowering her eyelashes.